Hello everyone, and a good day to you all. I wanted to do another video on AK-12 magazines. This time, however, I wanted to compare a clone magazine. This is the AC Unity AK-12 style magazine. I wanted to compare this to an actual AK-12 magazine, both to just see how well it compares, and also so you don't potentially get ripped off on Gunbroker or something like that if someone's trying to pass off one of these as an authentic mag, just so you know what to kind of look for. So I'm going to start by just talking about some of the most blatant differences that I can see externally, and then we're going to break these both down and kind of compare. There's actually a lot of differences I've already been looking at on these clone mags. So externally, I think the biggest giveaway that this is an AC Unity magazine is if you look here at the very bottom, it is stamped with a cartridge and it says 5.45 by 39 on it. Same on the other side. On an actual AK-12 magazine, you're not going to have anything on the right side, and on the left you will have the Kalashnikov Concern logo right there. Another difference I noticed, I'm not sure if this actually has any functional role or if it's just something in the manufacturing process, but on the actual AK-12 magazine you do have two dimples right here on each side. Maybe that's when they press in the steel feed lips, which you can kind of see them shining through a little bit right there. One thing to note on this one is this is not steel reinforced. No steel feed lips whatsoever. That's always a very, very big downside in my opinion as far as magazines go on AKs. The reason for that, just for a very quick, very brief explanation, is compared to on an AR where it's totally acceptable to have a completely polymer magazine, on a AK you're going to be having much more pressure from the bolt carrier and some of the internals in there pushing down on the magazine and on the feed lips. And these magazines that have polymer feed lips are just guaranteed to have a much shorter lifespan than one with steel reinforced feed lips. On the upside, however, we do have, on this clone magazine, we do have a metal reinforced, I'm not going to say steel necessarily, metal reinforced front and rear locking lugs. Now, I did a magnet test on here, and it's kind of strange. These are not sticking at all. The magazine does not stick whatsoever. Doing the exact same, you can see there, on an AK-12 mag, sticks on both spots. Of course, as I said, nothing on the steel feed lips. Now, I do get a bit of sticking here just on the spring, so you know that that's in there. But I don't know what this is. Maybe it's aluminum, but it's strange. So do note that. Maybe it's just demagnetized, but I'm thinking more it's not actual steel. Another difference that is pretty visually noticeable, but this actually plays a pretty big role if you're doing a magazine well grip, is that right there. The front of the AC Unity magazine is squared. On the AK-12 magazine, they really rounded this out, and you actually have these notches right here, which do seem to have a better grip when you are doing a magazine well grip. So this clone magazine does have those notches there as well, but this is far less comfortable to grip right here because of how squared off it is. And you can actually also see it down here. If you look at the base plate, you can see how much more squared it is. Now, the main reason I picked up this clone magazine here was I really wanted to just kind of take a look at it and do a video on it, but I was also hoping to have replacement parts for my actual AK-12 magazine, because these are expensive, and it would be nice if I had just a cheap kind of a donor magazine that I could just tear parts off of and not really care about. I can kind of do that with this, but as you already saw with the base plate, very different dimensions. Now, I've already been messing around with this a bunch off camera, and you can interchange these. They will fit. The locking plate right here where this goes through the base plate itself, on the actual AK-12 magazine, you can see the little rounded part right there that sticks through and retains the base plate. That will partially go through. It won't go through all the way if you try to use the clone base plate on this one, the actual magazine, but it will be enough to hold it in place. Moving back on this base plate, you'll also see we have what looks like, so this magazine in specific that I have it doesn't have it. It got broken off, and maybe that's how it made it into the country in the first place. But on a normal AK-12 magazine, this hole right here, you're actually going to have a plunger that sticks out that will indicate when your magazine's fully loaded, because you don't have a hole back here. On your normal AK magazines, you usually will have a hole on both your AKM mags, your AK-74 mags. We'll usually have a hole where you can just barely see the 30th round and kind of the primer and the edges of that cartridge. Just a little bit through there when it's fully loaded. So since you don't have that hole on here, you have a plunger that pops out when you reach 30 rounds, which is quite nice. Now it looks like you have one here, and this is partially misaligned. I'll explain that later. I was already disassembling this, and this actually is pretty hard to reassemble, and this locking plate doesn't go through perfectly every time. It kind of binds up. But this right here is actually part of the locking plate. It is not a fully loaded indicator. It doesn't work like one. So kind of unfortunate there, because since I was missing this one on my actual AK-12 mag, I was really hoping to just pull it and use it there, but unfortunately that's not going to happen. Now, one other thing on this base plate I also wanted to point out is the method of taking it apart is a little bit different here. So you can see this one has a serrated, just a squared off button that is supposed to go through here. As I said, it's not fully aligned right now. And on your AK-12 mag, and on most of the military and Russian manufactured magazines for the AK-74, you'll have this rounded off part here, and it has a hole in it, which is always quite nice. Not all the AK mags are going to have this hole here, but that is really, really helpful, because you can just take one of your cartridges, one of the bullets, and just push it through that hole, and it makes it way easier to push it in and pull the base plate off when you're disassembling the magazine. As I said, they don't all have it. A good example of one that doesn't is a lot of the Bulgarian mags don't have it, just for a quick, easy comparison. But this one being serrated, one thing I have noticed, I will say, if I bring this Bulgarian magazine back out, is on these magazines that don't have that hole, especially when they are still rounded like this, it gets a little difficult to actually push this down without either the bullet that I'm using to push it down kind of wanting to run off the side, or just getting it pushed down enough by hand to clear the base plate and take it off. On this one, the serrations are kind of nice. If you use the tip of a bullet, then it kind of catches in those serrations, and it's easy to take apart. Now, before I actually do take this apart, one more thing I wanted to touch on the magazine body itself. You do have these lines right here on the top, same as on the actual AK-12 magazine there. What that is for a stripper clip. I did test this. This does work. It's a little bit of a tighter fit than on the AK-12 magazine, but it does go on. And you can actually load stripper clips. I've never had good luck with a stripper clip on any magazine whatsoever. It's always difficult to use, but if you pop a few off at a time, it can work, but just never had that much luck with it. But it is an option, and at least that isn't just for aesthetic purposes. It actually does work. But let me go ahead now, and I wanted to take this apart. There's a few other differences inside of the magazine that are also rather interesting in how different they are. Now, this magazine base plate on here, I also wanted to say, while I'm disassembling it, or trying to, is very, very tight. The rail here, or the groove that it runs in, significantly tighter, and I'll demonstrate this later when I actually take it off, but compared to the rail on the actual AK-12 magazine here, it's just kind of sitting in there. On this one, there's actually a bit of tension on it with how tight it sits, which when you're working against that, plus actual spring tension from the follower, makes it pretty difficult. Just for demonstration, and just you'll see in a sec for comparison, actual AK-12 magazine and how simple that was to take apart. Now taking apart this one. I'm trying to leverage it a bit between the serrations and the base plate itself. I've just about got it. Also, this fake fully loaded indicator here, it likes to get caught. when you're disassembling it, so you do need to pop this out twice. But here we go. So, the follower itself, I don't know why they did this, but this is the clone one right here. They have an odd, it slopes down here at the front. So I'm not sure why they did that. Another thing that's quite different and is actually quite a nice feature on the AK-12 magazine that you do not get on this clone magazine is you do have these, you see these little white strips here. This is on the actual AK-12 magazine follower. Those are glow-in-the-dark followers, probably something similar to tritium. I don't know exactly what they're made out of, but they're really effective. If you're interested, I did a video quite a while ago. It's nowhere near the quality of what I'm at now, but there is a video I did in the past, quite a few years ago, on the actual AK-12 magazine and running down through some of its features. But this one is just nothing on the sides. You do still have, of course, the windows, like an actual AK-12 magazine, which works great. Even if you're just out at the range, just to see how much ammo you have left in the mag is always a very beneficial feature. One thing, however, on these windows is you may not be able to tell this on the camera. When I show it from a different angle, you might be able to, but the polymer windows here on the clone are way harder to see through than on the actual one. So there's the actual one there. There's the clone one. Just kind of a little bit more smoky. Also, here's where you should be able to see it a bit better. The clone actually is quite a bit thicker of polymer, which might also be why it's harder to see through. You can see right there, clone versus the actual one. I'm going back to the base plates here for a sec. You can see how similar they are in dimensions, but they are a little bit, everything on the clone one is just a little bit smaller. Here's a pretty good way to see the difference in dimensions right there. So if you want to reuse parts from the clone magazine for an actual mag, it'll take a good bit of Dremel work, but I do think it would be doable. So let me go ahead and put this magazine back together here. I wanted to kind of show how this locking plate down here is binding a little bit, because like I said, this is a pretty hard magazine to disassemble and pretty hard to reassemble as well. This locking plate right here also likes to get stuck. It's kind of overly tight to put this back in. And actually, while I'm at it, before I do put these fully back together, very little visual difference between the groove or the rail that the floor plate, base plate sits in, but it is different. And like I said, it is quite a bit tighter on this clone mag. All right, I got it. And usually just a tap will get those parts of the locking plate to go through the base plate, but you can see it's not going through on here, even after pretty hard hits. And I've tried hitting this against a table too. The way I actually managed when I first started the video and got this reassembled, the way I got this most of the way back through, as you saw, it was still somewhat misaligned, but it was by pushing a screwdriver through here and forcing this, just, you know, for spring tension, to mostly go through. The AK-12 magazine, the actual one, is not the easiest to reassemble either, because of how little kind of contact you have with the base plate itself. Since you need to have room for your finger to hold down the spring while also sliding on the base plate. But just to show you how much simpler it is, lucky time there, because that's normally way harder. But yeah, it is way easier than on the clone magazine. Still harder than on a normal AK mag though as well. I saw another review on the clone magazine here mentioning about the lockup. I haven't had any issues with this on my rifle. This is an SLR 104FR. It is a perfect fit, not too loose, not too tight, and is completely the same as an AK-12 magazine. I will say when I very first got this actual AK-12 magazine, they had a lot of extra material around right here where it kind of seals in to the magazine well. You can see those tabs next to the rear locking lug. A lot of extra material there. It quickly tore off after I think even just one loading, and didn't really get that on this one. This one was pretty much good right out the gate. I do have a little bit of rubbing just right there, but yeah, totally fine, totally normal. I am going to test this and actually shoot it. Just a few other things though I did want to mention that they got correct on this magazine, because I have been talking about a lot of the differences, and a lot of them are objectively inferior to an actual AK-12 magazine. But this does have the slanted base plate, as I already showed, which does allow you to monopod off this magazine very, very effectively. Quite nice there. And this does have the windows, of course, which makes it great to check your rounds. So they got those right, and that is quite nice. So next, I do actually want to test this out at the range. So I'm going to get this loaded up with rounds, and we'll just see how it does. And I'll do at least one magazine of this on camera, and I will definitely run at least one or two more. Get a good few cycles through this and see how it runs. I'm at the range now, and I've got this AC Unity magazine fully loaded here. One thing I did notice is, as I mentioned, I was having some issues aligning the locking plate into the base plate itself. And if you don't have it properly aligned, and maybe there's a tiny bit of leeway, but at least with how misaligned it was for me, I actually couldn't even fully load this. It was binding at about around 18 to 20. So I got it aligned properly now. This is fully loaded to 30. One other thing I also noticed, I don't know if it's because it's hotter now or if it's just that it's loaded, but this is actually quite a bit of a tighter fit than when it was unloaded. So usually I've noticed that these magazines that are a bit on the tight side tend to have feeding issues, but we'll just find out. So I'm going to go ahead and start with just 10 rounds at 50 yards, just slow fire, just to see if we have any issues, and hopefully we don't. The first one loaded just fine. All good so far, and I am using Golden Tiger ammo currently. So that's good. I'll go ahead and do some drills and just mix it up a bit so I'm not just burning through ammo to make this a bit productive, and continue to see if this has any issues, at least on its initial outing. Damn. Okay, just have one left. I'm about done here at the range here. Shot a decent amount of rounds through this magazine. Of course, this is only one afternoon. Didn't have any failures to feed or any issues whatsoever with it so far. I do want to test this when it gets colder, but now that it's more or less the summer when I'm doing this, so it's going to be a while before that, but it does get quite cold around here, and I will absolutely be testing this when it does get colder, see if there's any issues there. Usually when it gets colder, if there are even the slightest of issues with mags, they show up then. But so far, it's held up really well. I'm actually very impressed. I thought there might actually be some issues. The quality on this AC Unity clone magazine certainly does not compare to an actual AK-12 magazine. Now, this is going to be purely subjective, but keep in mind this is a magnitude, more or less, of a price difference with these. I would absolutely not trust my life to one of these, however, because these don't have steel feed lips. They don't have a lot of the features that the AK-12 magazine have. I use the AK-12 magazine as my primary home defense mag. It works great for that. But if you're just looking for a range magazine, this will actually probably work pretty well if you want all the features that are on here. If you're just looking for a good range magazine, I think the best option would probably be the Bulgarian commercial ones for the AK-74s. They are cheaper. They do have steel feed lips. They have all the steel reinforcement on the lugs as well. They just don't have the windows. So if it's this kind of AK-12, some of the features that it has that you're interested in, then this is a good choice if you, again, just want it for a range magazine, but absolutely not for really any serious defensive use or that sort of thing. But I'll definitely be using this more, and I'll see how well it holds up. Steel feed lips, as I said, are very important, and it's going to significantly increase the lifespan of this mag. So I don't know when it just has regular polymer feed lips how long it'll last, but we'll see. And the other thing is, as I said, it's a little bit unfortunate that pretty much quite a few of the parts on here aren't actually interchangeable with the AK-12 magazine. There are a few though that I can with a bit of work, and I'll probably Dremel down the sides of the base plate on here just so I can have it interchangeable with my actual AK-12 magazine. I'll probably paint the sides of the follower with some glow-in-the-dark paint, or well, we'll see. The follower is probably not going to be a part I'll need to change out anyway, but that is an option as well if you want to have more of those actual AK-12 features on the actual mags on this type of clone mag. Let me know if you have any other questions on this or anything else in the comments below. Thanks for watching, and see you all next time.